Hello, and welcome back to The Independent Pianist. It's your host, Cole Anderson, and today I'm jumping on the train a little bit late, but as you may have heard if you've been reading the New York Times recently, there has been a new Chopin waltz that's been discovered. So this wasn't even on my radar at all because I practically live under a rock, just sitting in my little room practicing and doing music things. However, some very dear friends from Colorado who are also fans of the channel and supporters of the channel asked me about this waltz and what I thought of it. So I actually dragged myself to a computer to do a little bit of research. And I found it's really quite fascinating. I don't give you the whole story because you can find that on many other sites. But to make a long story short, this little teeny minuscule waltz was just found, I guess, on a little piece of cardstock in a private collection. It had never been cataloged, it had never been identified before, but now, having been examined, experts think that it is actually authentic and by Chopin, this little teeny waltz. And it wouldn't be surprising, by the way, for this to be authentic. Chopin, like many of his contemporaries, was in the habit of giving little musical gifts. He would write down a short waltz or a mazurka or something like that in albums belonging to his friends as a way to say thank you or just as a way to give them a little gift. It was kind of like leaving a little calling card for a musician. That's one of the reasons why we have several different versions of many of the waltzes and mazurkas as well, because Chopin actually wrote slightly different versions of them for different people that he left in their albums. So, of course, my very first thought when my friends brought this piece up was, has it really been authenticated? And it seems that it has. Obviously, I don't have the access or the expertise to be able to identify the paper type. Apparently, they've dated the paper to the mid-1830s, though, in a period when Chopin was very active. However, even an amateur like myself can identify certain aspects of the handwriting in the score, which seem to suggest that it may have actually been written by Chopin. So, for example, if you take a look at this manuscript, you'll see that Chopin is using this kind of funny little bass clef sign, which was a peculiarity of his style of writing. So here you can see it in the manuscript for some of the Opus 10 etudes. He does the same thing. Also on this score, whoever wrote this did put a little slash in between the numbers and the time signature. That's another little quirk of Chopin's handwriting. You also notice that Chopin tended to write his note heads to the left side of the stem, even for the notes going stems up, which is a little bit odd. For modern printing conventions would have it be the other way around, with the note head on the right side of those upward facing stems. I'm sure Chopin was not the only person who did this, but he was pretty consistent in always putting the note heads on the left side of the stem like that. And you can see that this person here has also done the same thing. So it's just from the handwriting examples alone, it would be plausible that it could be by Chopin. However, of course, I want to go into some more musical details and find justification for believing that this is a piece by Chopin from the music itself. And I think that you can pretty easily do that. You can pretty easily identify that this piece is either by Chopin or it's by someone who's an extremely accomplished imitator of Chopin's style. Before I get into that, perhaps I should actually play you my recording of the piece which I made. So here's what I came up with in my recording. Okay, so welcome back. So right away, just determining the form of this piece as I notated in that little snippet of performance, there's a kind of introduction, and then there's a main theme. And we only have this one section which is repeated, which is a little bit unusual. The actual full-fledged waltzes that Chopin wrote in his career normally would have more sections, more of a rondo kind of form or a ternary kind of form or something like that. But here there's just one theme repeated. This is not extraordinary though for Chopin. He does have some other pieces like this. There's a Mazurka, Opus 7, number 5, which is a little bit similar. It just has one section which is repeated, and then he rather humorously notates at the end, repeat from the sign without ending. So it's kind of like a never-ending little loop that you can take if you so desire. He did write little joke pieces like that sometimes. So for this one, though, there are some quite interesting features of the theme which make me think that it is really an authentic piece. So, for example, the main theme has this very characteristic rhythm, the triplet. And it reminds me of some other Chopin pieces. So, for example, you might immediately be thinking of this waltz, the Les Adieux waltz. It's actually the exact same rhythmic pattern. Just in a different key. But it turns out that's not the only Chopin waltz that has this rhythm. So, for example, here's another one. The same rhythm. So it's quite interesting, actually. This rhythm seems to crop up quite a bit for Chopin. This is from the A minor waltz, opus 34, but actually in the other waltz, the A flat major waltz, there's also an appearance of a rhythm like this. It's in a somewhat different context. But it's actually the same little pattern. It's a little bit faster, but the same idea. I have to admit as well that there are several features of this little waltz which remind me very much of the great A minor waltz from Opus 34 that I was just playing a little bit of an excerpt from. They both start with a harmonically static opening which sets a tonic pedal point. So in the Opus 34 number 2 waltz you get something like that. And of course in this new waltz, we again get this tonic pedal point through the entire opening. Just like that. Obviously not identical, but there's a similarity in approach, in compositional approach. There's also this very interesting and characteristic kind of figure that Chopin uses here, or we assume it's Chopin that's using it. And this kind of figuration was actually rather characteristic of Chopin as well. It's referred to as blind thirds, where you have a double note, a third, and then a single note interspersed. And you can definitely find many places in his works where he actually uses this sort of technique. Maybe a famous one is in the introduction and Polonaise for piano and cello. It's used for more of a virtuoso effect there, but it's the same kind of idea with this interspersing. So again, so far, pianistically, musically speaking, even the rhythm of the main theme, it's very believable that this could actually be by Chopin. So I'm pretty much convinced. Also, if we look at the deeper musical characteristics of how this little waltz is composed, there are several very striking features which suggest Chopin's style. If you've seen any of my other videos on Chopin works, you'll know that although Chopin had a very original kind of harmonic style, and melodic flair. Some of his compositional techniques were quite reminiscent of the Viennese classical masters, like Beethoven, who Chopin had a kind of uneasy admiration for. And oftentimes Chopin would use similar kind of techniques of motivic development, that there would be some kind of smaller motivic idea that would be then expanded and developed through the rest of the piece. You see that, of course, in Beethoven. A famous example is something like the Fifth Symphony, where a simple little motive like this is expanded over the course of all four movements and provides a lot of musical material. Of course, this is a much smaller example, but there is kind of a melodic idea which is developed here. It comes right in the opening here with this descending chromatic line. And this is composed out in several places later on. For example, this same kind of shape. You can also see it in measure 13. This kind of descending chromatic line figures quite prominently throughout the entire piece. You can even hear it in the very last measure as well. And this style of writing, too, that you get in measure 13, where you have what's written ostensibly as a single line. You have this line all written in eighth notes. It looks like it's just one melody, but Chopin writes it in such a way that it kind of divides into two separate lines. You get, and then that's also very characteristic of Chopin's method of writing. It really comes from some of the later works of Mozart in particular. Mozart explored this type of piano writing quite a lot, where there's a suggestion of counterpoint within one line or in one hand. I also think that the ending gesture is pretty typical of Chopin, the way that it just kind of fades away and ends almost as if in the middle of an idea of a sentence. There's no exaggeration of the ending of the piece. It just kind of fades away like that. I think that's also very characteristic of many of Chopin waltzes, including the big A minor from Opus 34. The Opus 34 waltz, of course, actually ends with the introduction coming back, but it also has this kind of fragmentary, kind of fading away effect at the end. Just kind of ends on one chord like that, one A minor chord. And actually, the way that Chopin writes the ending pattern reminds me a little bit of another one of the cadences in the A minor waltz, the big A minor waltz from Opus 134. That one reminds me quite a bit of the ending in this little miniature waltz. Do you think it's a little bit similar as well, that ending pattern? It uses the same kind of division, contrapuntal division. It has the same kind of shape and the same kind of just fading away, this kind of evanescent feeling. So that's about it. It's a very short little piece, very easy to talk about. I hope you enjoyed my little talk on this. I think it really is a beautiful little miniature, very powerful, very beautiful. And I actually went out of my way here when I recorded this piece to do it without reference to any other recordings, because I know Long Long already has one. So I waited until I had finished my recording before I went and listened to anyone else's. And I was glad I did that because I think I came up with my own kind of take on it, which was quite different from any of the other ones that I've heard so far, which, I'm always glad, whether it's good or bad, I'm always happy if I'm able to do something which is kind of just original to myself and true to my own feelings about what I see printed in the score. One thing that did kind of come out to me, which I didn't, when I did go and listen to some other people play this new little waltz, since there are no, there's no tradition of anyone playing this until just now. But it was kind of interesting to me that people decided not to take the sempre forte in measure 8 too literally. Many people kind of dropped the sound, including Long Long, I believe, kind of dropped their sound for the main theme, this, and they played it in a little bit more of a delicate kind of way. I took kind of a different approach. It is kind of extraordinary that if this was by Chopin, Chopin did write a triple fortissimo in bar 7. And Chopin did occasionally use the triple forte marking, but it wasn't that common for him. So it is pretty remarkable to me that he writes this and then also sempre forte after that. This suggests to me that the main theme is actually supposed to be quite stormy, with a lot of bluster and sound to it. So I actually think it might be a little bit of a mistake to drop the sound and kind of do the stereotypical delicate waltz thing. It might be better actually to play this in a little bit more of a very impassioned way. It seems to go from brooding to the heights of stormy passion very, very quickly. So that's just my little 2 cents. You can take it as you will, but well worth learning this delightful little piece, so I highly recommend you go take a look at it. I have a little link that I've included in the description box to a place where you can download it for free in a nice typeset version, not the handwritten manuscript that I was using in this video. So if you're interested and intrigued and you want to learn it, it's not too hard to play, then you can go take a look at that. So that's about it for today. I'll be back next week with some more music for you. I've almost finished recording Rhapsody in Blue, and I am still working on the Liszt Sonata, which surprisingly is coming back to my fingers a lot faster than I expected it would. I'm basically mostly focused on trying to get my octaves as fast as I want to at the end. Those are if you just hit the right spot, they're very, very beautiful, but they're very hard to play. So that's what I've been doing recently, so hopefully I'll have something in that category ready pretty soon here. But in the meantime, please just like the video, subscribe, and come back next time. So take care and keep practicing.